Now, in this tutorial series, what I want to do is, first of all, I'm going to assume that you guys have never created an Android app before, but you guys do have some programming experience. So what I want to do is I want to show you guys how to develop Android apps for both the phone and the tablet from the ground up. So that's what we're going to be doing, creating some awesome apps, someone that is totally new to Android app development. However, before I begin, I want to mention this. For those of you who have been following my YouTube channel for a long time, you probably already noticed that I have another Android app development tutorial series, and the reason that I decided to make a brand new one is because that tutorial series, we actually made it a couple years ago, and since then, a lot of the software and tools that you use to develop these apps have been updated. Actually, we have a brand new piece of software called Android Studio, and I'll show you guys how to install that and use it and everything. But the software itself is a lot different than what we used to teach Android development in the past. So again, this tutorial series is pretty much just going to be updated, new, kind of more relevant. So that's why I decided to do that. So anyways, I'm going to be quiet now and let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing we need is of course the Java JDK. Now I'm guessing that if you guys are watching this, then you already are familiar with Java, at least a little bit, and you probably already have the Java JDK installed on your computer. However, just to make sure that I cover everything 100%, if you don't have the Java JDK already installed on your computer, this is how you get it. And of course, I probably should mention this. Why do we need a Java JDK if we're making Android apps? Well, all Android apps, as well as a lot of the software itself, is made using Java. That's what language we're going to write in primarily to make these Android apps. So, of course, the Java JDK, which stands for the Java Development Kit, is the core foundation that we need before we can even think about making any Android apps. So, the website always changes, but if you go to Google and type in download Java JDK, then the first thing that's always going to pop up is the link to download this Java Development Kit. Now, if you click right here, what we want is this Java Platform JDK right there. However, whenever we click here, we see that we have a lot of Java development kits that are available for download. Alright, so we know that we don't want Linux because I'm not on Linux. We know that we don't want Mac, so we have a couple options here, Windows x86 and Windows 64. Now, the difference between these two is 64 is for the Windows 64-bit version, and the 86 is for the 32-bit version of Windows. So if you don't know what version of Windows you have, go to the Start menu, and where you see Computer right here, right-click it, and then you're going to see a thing called Properties. Whenever you select that, if you look at your system type, it says, okay, 64-bit operating system. So that means I have Windows 64-bit. So whenever I download this, I'm going to choose 64. If yours says 32, then click this one right here. But, of course, you need to accept the agreement first, and then download it. And what it's going to do is it's going to download an executable file, and it's going to take a while, so I'll pause my video. I won't make you watch the whole thing. And we are back. It took about a minute, but now I just download the entire executable. And of course, if you're on Chrome, which you probably should be, highly recommend it, then go to your downloads and you can just click that. However, if you accidentally close out of that, then of course your downloaded files, if you go to your, well, I'll just show you guys. Alright, you can either go to your computer from Windows Explorer and click downloads. That's probably the easiest way, so just do that. So anyways, whatever file you just downloaded, double click it, and then of course, I actually don't know if you could see that. I don't know if my screen recorder showed my system little pop-ups there, but it says, do you want to allow this to access your computer? Yes. Let me close out all this. Alright, so this is really self-explanatory. If you ever downloaded anything before, then it's going to be simple. Just click next, next, and it's going to do all the hard work for you. However, there's one thing, once this is completely done, that you guys need to follow along with. So again, if you think about skipping this entire tutorial, don't do that because you're going to miss an important step at the end. So wait for this entire thing to la 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 whatever. Alright, and what you want to do is you want to make sure to leave everything in its default location, because as long as you do that and as long as you follow along, then whenever you download and install Android Studio, it's not gonna be confused looking at some weird location for anything. So make sure that you keep all the default settings whenever you're running this installer. Alright, so now we have the JDK installed on our computer. However, before we download Android Studio, what we need to do is we need to tell our computer exactly where it is. And that's because later on when we when we download Android Studio, it's going to look for that JDK. So what we need to do is we need to explicitly say, hey computer, this is where the JDK is. So go to your start menu and then click on computer, and then make sure you're starting at your hard drive. So in order to get the path to this, as long as you kept everything at default during installation, it's going to be in your program files. And then if you go down to Java, double click that, and what folder you want to click on is actually the JDK. This is the Java runtime environment, the JRE. Don't worry about that. Double click the JDK, and this is actually the path you want. So what you can do now is you can actually right click any of these files, but because it's going to give you the same path, what I'm about to show you guys, but just for consistency, right click this bin and click properties. So again, this is the location that you're looking for right here, the location that your Java development kit is at. So copy that, right click and copy, and now once you have that location, close out of everything, because we have to tell our computer, alright, this is where our JDK is. So how do we do that? It's actually pretty simple. If you open your start menu again and right click computer and go to properties, you're going to see a link on the left hand side that says advanced system settings. If you click that, you're going to see this little pop-up right here. Click on the button that says environment variables. So I already have this set up because actually for this tutorial I uninstalled my Java JDK and then I reinstalled it. So, just to show you guys how to do it. But you're probably aren't going to have a variable set up right here. So in order to get that, click new under user variables, and you need to name the variable Java underscore home. Make sure that everything is in capital letters, and then for the variable value, paste in that location of your JDK and hit OK. So what we're essentially doing is we're telling our computer, alright, whenever you need to work with the Java JDK, or the JDK is kind of redundant what I'm saying, but whenever Android Studio is looking for it, then it's going to look in your environment variables and it's going to say, okay, that's where all the crap I need is. So, it's not literally going to say crap, but, now that we have everything compatible and our computer is able to find and work with the Java JDK, it's probably getting annoying that I keep saying that, but whatever. We are now set up and ready to move on to the next step. So thank you guys for watching, and I also want to mention this before I let you guys go. If you guys have any questions during this entire tutorial series about anything small, including a little bit of code, or anything big like maybe you have an error while you try to install something, then go to my forum, and under this section right here, Java and Android development, if you click that, you can create a new post, and then you can ask it right there, and a lot of people are always here willing to help. You can also browse some of the common topics, and there's a lot of good information in here as well. So chances are, if you have a problem, someone already asked it and they already figured it out. But if you can't find your answer, then go ahead and create a new post. Again, I am always on this website, and a bunch of other people loving to help you out. So for now, thank you guys for watching. In the next video, we'll go ahead and download and install Android Studio. Alright guys, so the next thing we have to do is download Android Studio. Now, the website is most likely going to change because they always do. However, if you just type in download Android Studio, it's always going to be the first thing that pops up. So click this, And of course, this is the program that allows you to write Android applications. Now, the cool thing about this is that unlike the old program that you used to use, this was made just for writing Android apps and it has everything you need built in. So this is the program where we actually write the code, and this is the program where all these little emulators, which are pretty much like virtual phones that you can test on, those are built into the entire like layout designer. And I'll teach you guys how to use that later on. But it's basically a graphical way to lay out your Android apps that's built in as well. It's incredibly awesome, incredibly cool. So let's go ahead and get started. So of course, click that, agree to whatever. Let me read this real quick. Oh, pretty cool. All right, download this. And it's actually probably going to take a little bit to download because it's almost a gigabyte. It might be a gigabyte by the time you download it. But anyways, I'll come back to you guys when this is done. Alright, so it took a while, but I finally have it download this executable file right here. And I want to mention this real quick before I move on. If anyone was lazy and decided to skip my last tutorial, what we did is we set up the JDK to be compatible with Android Studio. So if you did do that and skip everything, then follow this direction right here. But for those of you guys who stuck with me, then you guys are good to go because we already did that step. So anyways, actually I'm going to close out of that. We don't need this browser anymore. However, if we go to our downloaded files, then we see that we now have this Android Studio bundle. So this, of course, is the installer. So double click that. Alright, so anything that pops up, just say yes. We trust them. We trust Google. Next. And leave. Pretty much you're going to leave all of these as the defaults. Agree. Agree. Do I want to install in the default location? Yes. Recommended. Looks good. That looks good as well. Alright, so it says it is complete. Installation complete. Setup was completed successfully. Sweet. Go ahead and click next. And I actually don't want to start this up right yet because what I want to do is I'm going to go to my start menu right here and I'm going to go to all programs. And now we can see after we have everything downloaded and installed, we're going to have a folder called Android Studio. So if I click that, I'm going to see this Android Studio program. I'm going to right click it and send it to desktop. So that way I have a Android Studio icon on my desktop because we're going to be using it a lot now. So the first time I open this, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose Run as Administrator. Now the very first time you open it, this thing is going to pop up right here and it's going to download all the extra components that it needs, but don't worry, this is only a one-time thing the very first time to set everything up. Alright, so all those additional components look like everything is good to go. So click Finish. Alright, so this is the welcome screen to Android Studio. From here, what we can do is we can actually start a brand new project. However, before we get started, there is one last thing that we need to do. And this isn't absolutely necessary, but it's going to save you guys a ton of headaches in the future. If you go down to Configure right here, you're going to see something called SDK Manager. And if this is grayed out or you can't select it for some reason, make sure that you close out of this and right click and Run as Administrator, and then it's going to be available. So anyways, click this right here, and what's going to happen is you're going to have a new pop-up window that appears. Now this basically allows you to download additional packages or additional code that you're going to use whenever you're developing apps. As you can see, it says install 9 packages, and the ones that are checked are actually the ones that we're going to want to install. So if you click this button right here, and of course we need to accept the license and install, then what it's going to do is it's going to install these additional packages. Alright guys, so once you have all the optional packages installed, what you can do is just close out of Android SDK Manager, and it's also a better idea to close the Android Studio altogether, and now right click it and run it as administrator to open it again. And the reason that you want to do this is because whenever you open it this time, you want to make sure that Android Studio is aware of all the updated packages. So that's why we closed out and opened it again, so it doesn't have anything weird stored in its cache or memory or anything. So now we are finally done installing everything and setting everything up. We are ready to start making our first Android project. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial, what I want to do is I just want to make sure that everyone's Android Studio is set up and working correctly. And the best way to do this is actually build a really simple, basic Android Studio project and run it. And if we get any errors, if we come across any issues, I'll show you guys how to fix them as well. So the first thing that you always do whenever you create a new project is just click Start a New Android Studio Project. You guys probably could have figured that out. Now I'll talk you guys through this real quick, but again, this is just an example to make sure that everything is working correctly. So if I am kind of running over everything kind of quick, or if you don't fully understand everything that I'm doing, don't worry, we're going to be coming back to everything, cover it in detail later on. But again, let me explain just real quick what's going on. Now this, of course, the application name is not only the project name, so it's not only, whenever you're browsing your computer, you can identify which project you're working on, but this application name is actually the name of the app whenever you put it in the Google Play Store. So again, for this one, we can just keep the default name because this is, like I said, a really stupid example. Just to make sure everything's working, we're not actually going to be selling this. However, when you do develop an app that you are eventually going to sell, take some time and think of a good application name because it does matter. Now, the company domain, again, yours is probably going to be like, I don't know what it was to start with, probably like example.org or example.com or something. But the company domain is how you identify each application. Now, as you can see, whenever you type in a domain name, okay, come on cursor, the new boston.com, .cinnamon, alright, .com, you see that the package name fills in automatically, and this is called a reverse domain notation. So whenever you're going to a website, you would type the name followed by .com. The package name is com.thenewboston. The application name. So again, this is just an identifier to say, okay, there's a lot of apps named My Application on the Google Play Store. How do we know which one is Bucky's? Well, that's the one with the New Boston. So again, this is just the name of your app, your website, and then once you fill in both those things, it fills in the rest of the crap for you. So, got like phlegm in my throat. So click Next, and this is actually an easy screen to understand. It says, okay, you're developing an app for the phone and tablet. This is all we're going to be doing for this tutorial series. I'm not going to show you guys how to develop anything for the TV or wear. Now, wear is pretty much anything that you can wear on your body. Like, I don't know if they have like glasses yet, but this is like smartwatches and stuff like that. So again, this tutorial series is just going to cover how to make apps for the phone and tablet. So select that, and also I probably should mention this. The minimum SDK, you probably either want to put 8 or whatever the default is. Now, this is well, you guys know like the different versions of Android that came out. Of course, the later ones are the newest ones, but the reason that you just don't want to go ahead and develop for the latest one is because a bunch of people still have these older versions. So if you say, okay, well, I got, I don't know, maybe you got KitKat, so that's great, but whenever you put your app on the Google Play Store, check this out. It's only going to run on 25% of the devices. So if you go all the way back to Froyo, this was a really popular SDK. Whenever you develop apps for this, then it's going to run on pretty much all devices unless someone has like an old ancient phone. Now, if you're like, okay, well, with that logic and understanding, let me just go ahead back to the original API right there, and I should be good to go. Well, you don't want to do that either, because whenever you make an app that's compatible with all these ancient operating systems, it's going to involve a lot more code and a lot more testing, and it's going to be pretty much pointless because no one even has these anyways. So again, a good median for this is to go to API 8 at the time of this recording. Again, this is probably gonna change as time goes on. But right now, I would stick with API 8, and this makes sure that you cover pretty much every device that anyone would have, and you don't have to write any useless code. So let me adjust in my seat a little bit here. So now our next choice is, okay, add an activity to mobile. So we probably should understand what the heck is an activity. Of course, this is like the 2-second tutorial, so I'm just gonna explain it really simple. Ugh. Okay, probably should edit that out. I'll probably just leave it in. Too lazy. Alright, so right now, just think of an activity as a screen. So if you're making an app for, I don't know, a website, the home screen would be its own activity. The about section would be another activity. So again, it's a little more complex than that, but for now, just think of an activity as a screen on your app or a view. So for this demonstration, we're just going to have blank activity. So what this is going to do is it's going to set up a template app with one screen on it. Perfect for testing. So now, of course, we need to give our activity a name. Why do we need to give our activity a name? Well, that's just because whenever you're making an app with a bunch of different screens, you obviously need a way to identify all of them, because if you want to say, okay, switch to the home screen, switch to the, I don't know, my profile screen. Well, this is just how your app is going to identify each one and know what's going on. And we'll talk about the layout and all these different things later on. The layout is pretty much how things are positioned on the screen, and all this other stuff is kind of, that's not the point of this tutorial. We'll cover that later on. But for now, just remember that this main screen is called main activity. Simple enough, and finish. Alright guys, so after Android Studio is finished setting up and preparing your project, you're going to have something that looks like this. And if you have an error right now, then I know what error that you're getting, so I'm going to show you guys how to fix that in just a second. But for now, I just want to warn you guys, even though it looks kind of overwhelming, trust me, this is set up perfectly for making apps in about 7 tutorials or something. Once we cover the entire interface, this is going to feel just like home, and all the stuff that feels overwhelming right now is actually you're probably going to find it very useful. But for now, I'm going to mention a couple of things that are going to make your life a whole lot easier. The first thing is, if you ever want to access that SDK manager from here, then what you do is you go up to this little thing. It kind of looks like the little, I think his name's Andy the Android. It looks like he's sitting in this bucket with a down arrow. But this is the Android SDK manager. So click that. And again, you don't have to close out of your entire project to open up the SDK manager anymore. And I actually want to show you guys one more package that I forgot to tell you guys to install later on. Earlier. So if you open up the SDK manager and you scroll all the way down, then make sure that you have this package installed right here. It's the Intel x86 emulator accelerator. And again, I installed it already, but it takes like 2 seconds to install. But what this is basically, whenever we develop these sample apps, what we're going to do is we're going to run those on pretty much emulators, or they're pretty much like little virtual phones that we can use for testing. And those are kind of slow, so that package just helps speed up the entire process and makes it run a little bit smoother and faster. So if you guys wanted to know what that was, there you go. If you didn't, well, sorry for wasting your time. But that's how you get to the Android SDK manager from here. Now another thing that I want to do is mention this. A lot of you guys probably have an error that popped up that says, okay, I can't find the Android SDK, or I don't know where the Java JDK is. You got to help me out because Android Studio won't run how it's configured right now. So if Android Studio has a problem finding either of those things, then go to File and go to Project Structure, and then from here it says, okay, the Android SDK location is where. And actually, if you see, like, I think if you get an error, it shows like some red text or something. But in order to navigate to it, if it's not set up correctly, just click these three little dots on the right hand side, and then you can say, okay, you obviously aren't looking in the right place. This is where I downloaded my Android SDK. And the same thing with a Java Development Kit or the JDK. make sure that the directory ends with JDK in your version number, and make sure that the Android SDK ends with SDK. So again, if you downloaded it to a different directory than I did in the example, then you're going to have these errors. So that is where you fix them, depending on wherever you downloaded it. So mine is correct, so I'm just going to close out of that. And I probably should mention this as well. Alright, so just so every user is looking at the same thing, I'm going to change the app theme right here because this typically changes from user to user. So make sure, I'll show you guys. If you click on app theme right here, then the theme is pretty much the overall look and feel of your app. So switch yours to Material Light and click OK. And as you can see, your interface changes a little bit. Again, this is just so everyone is looking at the same thing, and you're not watching this tutorial and are like, okay, mine looks different than yours, and that's weird. Now, the last thing I want to mention before we actually run this is this. Right now, whenever I'm teaching these tutorials, you see that we have minimal screen size, and that's just because I wanted to make the window small enough where people with smaller monitors can see the videos clearly. Well, the problem with this is the screen, whenever we're developing this app, it looks kind of small. So in order to get rid of this phone body, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the settings, and you see it says include device frame. I'm going to uncheck that. So again, if you ever like developing and looking at the phone itself, maybe it gives you a better idea of what the application is going to look like, then do that. However, just to make sure that these tutorials are a little bit more clear, I'm going to get rid of that, and then we're going to see the interface a little more clearly. So once we're ready to run our app and test everything out, this is what I want you to do. Go up to Tools and select Android AVD Manager. Now, if you don't want to go through all those steps, you can also click this little button right here. This is just a shortcut to the AVD Manager. And the AVD Manager stands for Android Virtual Device Manager. So this, let me make this a little bit more clear. Alright, so this is where you manage all of your virtual devices. And again, a virtual device is just a little simulator, a little testing phone that you can make so you don't have to take an actual Android phone and plug it into your computer whenever you're developing apps and you want to test them out. So by default, whenever you download and install Android Studio, it comes with one virtual device. This is the Nexus 5. So that's what simulator phone comes built with it. But of course, if you ever want to make a new one, you just create virtual device by clicking that button down there. And you can actually create little simulator TVs and whatnot. But I'll talk you guys through how to create a virtual device. I don't know, maybe you want to create a same virtual device as the phone that you actually own. But for now, you can just use this one right here. Now, the reason that I'm not going to use this one and the reason that I built another one called Bucky's phone is something that you don't have to worry about. It's actually because whenever I'm recording these tutorials and I'm running this little simulator, it takes up a lot of space and it doesn't really show that great on my like whenever I'm making tutorials. So that's why I made Bucky's phone. It's pretty much the same thing, except I made it a lot smaller so it shows up better in my tutorials. But anyways, what you want to do is you want to click this little green button right by Nexus 5. I'm going to click mine called Bucky's phone, and this is going to launch, as you can see right here, the virtual device, which is pretty much just a simulator of a phone. Now, the first time you run this, it's going to take a long time to boot up because what it pretty much represents is you're buying a brand new phone, so it has to start it up for the very first time. And the reason that this takes so long is, if you think about it, what it's actually doing is it's building an entirely new operating system or an entirely new device within your computer. So it has to build a new phone with a new operating system that can run new apps. So that's why the entire build process and to get it up and running takes a little bit longer than you may like. So once your virtual device is up and running, and yours may look a little different than mine because I did run mine before, but to you it may simulate opening a brand new phone, so it's going to be like welcome to Android, you're going to have to press OK, whatever. But anyways, you just click OK a bunch of times and then you're going to get to this screen right here. So this is the unlock screen, and of course if you are used to an iPhone or something, the unlocking process is a little bit different than it is on Android. So just click and drag up and that's going to unlock your phone. And as you can see, it's just like a normal phone. You can even browse the internet from here. But what we are worried about is running our application. So let's hop over back to Android Studio. And I'm just going to close out of this. But what you want to do is you want to go up to this little button right here. And whenever you hover over it, it says Run App. So click that little green triangle. And what this is going to do is it's going to build your app for you. And it's actually going to give us one more option, I believe. Yep, right here. So it says, okay, we're building your app. Where do you want to test it out? So since we already have this emulator running right there, make sure that your radio button is checked. Choose the running device. And of course, you're probably only going to have one running. So you can just click OK. So what this is going to do is it's going to build it and it's going to launch it in our little simulator phone. So it takes a little bit of time, but don't worry, that's normal. But eventually, as you can see, what happens is it finally launches, and that's actually pretty cool that you don't have to actually go click on app and open it or anything. It just launches right for you. Pretty sweet. So we see that our application says my application, hello world. Probably the coolest app ever invented. We could probably put this on Google Play right now and make at least like $10 million. But of course, what we want to do is actually jazz this up a little bit more before we put this bad boy for sale. So that is the process of how to build a very simple app and test everything out. Again, my guess is that since everyone's system is set up a little bit differently, if things don't run completely smoothly for you, or if you get any bugs or errors, please go to my forum, post your questions, and there are a lot of people willing and actually wanting to answer your questions for you, because whenever they answer someone's questions on the forum, they actually get these things called points. So you are encouraged to ask questions because they probably want questions to help you out with. But anyways, if you have any problems, that's what you do. Thank you guys for watching. In the next tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you guys something else that is definitely awesome. So I'll see you then. Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a real quick overview of the interface, because whenever I first started out with Android Studio, it was all kind of overwhelming and kind of confusing. It just made me feel uncomfortable, not really knowing what any of this stuff was. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go through piece by piece and talk to you guys in detail what everything means. Instead, as we need the tools, that's when I'm going to be talking to you guys about, okay, so this is, the AVD manager and this is how you use it. So instead of overwhelming you guys, giving you, the intricate details of what everything is, I just want to give you guys a real general overview to make you guys a little bit more comfortable with the interface. Blech, can't talk. Alright, so of course, at the very top, this is simple up here. We have the menu bar. Pretty much all of our additional tools and settings, as well as some, very common stuff we can find in the menu bar. Nothing new there. Now under it, we have a toolbar. So all of these little icons, this is actually called the toolbar right here. Now, as we saw in the last tutorial, what the toolbar is basically shortcuts to more commonly used aspects of the program. For example, maybe this SDK manager. Well, we can also get there with tools, Android SDK manager, but since we use that quite a bit, that's why they put that in the toolbar. Now, if you ever want to customize your toolbar, I recommend just keeping it the same, but if you ever have a tool that you find yourself using a lot, you can actually right click in this empty area and click customize menus and toolbars, and then you can click the little programs that you either want to remove or add. Again, you click on them and all of your settings are right here to either add them or remove them from your toolbar. Pretty intuitive. So that's what that little chunk of this Android Studio is. Now underneath this this little thing right here that looks like I don't know, kind of a file directory explanation on like steroids or something. This is actually called the navigation bar, and basically what it is it shows the path to whatever current file you're working on. So this right here, the navigation bar, is pretty much the same as this thing up here. So it's pretty much a long file path. Now the cool thing about this is that, like I said, it is pretty much a file path on steroids, because if you ever go to a directory, you can actually click on it and it's going to show you all the contents of that directory. So pretty sweet. And again, it's a file path to whatever current file you're working on. So if you change a file, this is going to change as well. Now, this main area that I cannot ignore is the editor window. So the editor window is where we're going to be spending most of our time, and it's pretty much the main area to show whatever file you are currently working on. So right now, we'll talk about this designer later on. It's pretty much, as you probably could have guessed, how you lay out all the widgets and stuff for your interface. Now, we're also going to be looking at this a lot, which is pretty much the text view of the file, pretty much where we're going to be editing the source code and doing a bunch of cool stuff. But anyways, this main area shows whatever current file you're working on. You probably could have guessed that. Now over here on the left hand side, this is called the project window. Now whenever I am developing an app, what I like to do is I like to change this drop down from Android to project. So as you can see, whenever you change it to project, it's going to list every directory in your entire project. Now one of the most important directories is called app. Now this is where all your source code and all your like main layout files are. So if you just want a real condensed view of all the important files, then you can just hover down to Android, and I'll actually keep that on Android for this tutorial. But if you ever want an overview of your entire project, again, you can change that to project. But just for these tutorials, all the source code and stuff is in this Android drop down. So I'll stick with that. I don't know, I think it'll be a little bit easier, I guess. Alright, so we pretty much covered this whole interface except for these things on the side. These little bars that say like project, structure, all of that crap. So first of all, as you can see, whenever I click it, it toggles whatever window is on and off. So this is the project window, and I'm going to click that. It's going to toggle that visible, or I don't want to say it's invisible, but you know, visible, invisible. I'll say that, whatever. So if you ever feel that your entire interface, it just looks kind of cluttered and you decide that you want to hide all of these quick window bars, then go down in the very bottom left corner and you're going to see this little square gray icon. This is the toggle either to show or hide all of these quick window bars. So click that and they're all going to be hidden. Click it again, show them all, hide, show. Can do it all day if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and click that again so it shows them all, because that's the default. Now another thing I want to point out is if you hover over it, it's going to give you all of those quick windows. So I don't know, maybe you're on maybe you're on the structure and you want to get the project again, but you're too lazy to bring your mouse all the way back up there. So you can just go this, click project, and it's going to pop up for you. Again, just two different ways of doing the same thing. If you go to help, and by the way, that was basically the quick 2-second overview of the interface. Of course, there's a lot of other stuff, but like I said, I'm going to be covering those as we need them, as not to overwhelm you guys right now. So what I'm going to teach you guys right now are just little tips that you guys are probably going to thank me for, because they're just going to make your experience developing apps a whole lot better. First is if you go to help and you scroll down to default key map references. Let me actually minimize this, although I don't think it'll matter. What it's going to do is it's going to give you a PDF of all of the keyboard shortcuts that you can use for the program. So again, of course, I'm not going to go over any of these right now because that would just be dumb and boring. So instead, what I recommend is actually printing this out, laminating it, and putting it on every single wall in your room, because these are incredibly useful and you're going to be using them a lot. But actually for these tutorials, I don't like to use keyboard shortcuts, because if like a window pops up and then you guys just see my mouse in the same place, you're like, okay, how the heck did you do that? And I don't know, it just gets confusing whenever I'm teaching, but they will be useful to you. Now, another thing that I want to show you guys that probably a lot of you guys are itching to do is change the theme of your entire Android Studio. I know a lot of you like a dark theme, so let me show you how to do that right now. If you go to File, Settings, and this was something else. Alright, so File, Settings, and if you go to Appearance and then Theme, by default this is IntelliJ or whatever it is. Windows 1 is pretty much a lighter theme, but the font's a little bit different. In Darkula, I don't want to change it because my screen recorder is probably going to tweak out if I change the entire theme. But right now, I'm going to keep this one because I love it. Darkula is the dark one that you guys might be looking for. Windows, if you like really ugly, stupid looking font, then you can choose that too. So of course, after this, you would just hit apply and then okay, but I like mine, so I'm just gonna actually, while I'm in here, I'll talk to you guys about a few more things. Alright, so first of all, actually let me back out of here so you guys can see what I'm about to teach you. Alright, so first of all, whenever we're working with a text file, just go ahead and click any Java file to open up. We're not going to be talking about the source code right now, but I'm going to be showing you guys some useful things of how to actually work with it. As you can see, the gutter on the left hand side, for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but every IDE and every text editor pretty much that I ever downloaded, it doesn't show the line numbers by default. And I have no idea why they do that because I always love looking at the line numbers. So to display the line numbers on this one, it's actually really easy. Just right click anywhere in the gutter, that's the gray area, and click show line numbers. Pretty sweet, check that out. Now another thing that I absolutely hate is this code folding. That's pretty much when you have a bunch of code, like an entire body of a function or this right here, and it bunches it up for you. Now the reason I hate this is because I love looking at all of the code, and also for the tutorials, if you guys are trying to copy the source code and you're like, okay, I need to know what he imported, but oh, that's great, it's all bunched up. It's really annoying, even to me, and I'm sure it's even more annoying to you. So if you want to get rid of all of the code folding, as it's called, go to File, and back in Settings, let me minimize this, make sure you guys see everything, and go to that's console folding. Go to Editor, under the IDE settings, and code folding. And right here, this first checkbox is just to show the code folding outline. And that's that little arrow you can click to either bunch it up or expand it. But what I want to do is I want to uncheck all of these. So none of my code is going to be folded. Again, once I apply this, as you can see, my actual area that that you guys can see may be a little bit bigger, but whenever you guys are trying to read my source code in the tutorials, then it's going to make it a whole lot easier. So again, I highly recommend putting line numbers on by right clicking, showing line numbers, and getting rid of code folding because I absolutely hate it. Personal preference, but you know, gotta encourage you guys to do the same. So in the next couple tutorials, now that we are kind of more familiar with the interface, we can get into the good stuff, actually creating an app, the interface, and well, it's gonna be awesome. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial, what I want to do is I want to show you guys how to create your own custom AVDs, of course your virtual devices. I showed you guys how to use the default one earlier, but if we want to become expert app developers from the ground up, that's where we need to start. We need to understand pretty much what goes on behind the scenes, because after all these apps that people develop, they would be pretty worthless if we didn't have any phones or tablets to run them on. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and in the next tutorial, I think I said that last time, but in the next tutorial, I promise, we're going to be getting into the code, the designer, all that good stuff. So for now, hop up to this little thing. Remember, this is the AVD manager, and again, I already told you guys that I created my own custom one right here, and in the last example, you guys may have ran this one, and it may have taken up your whole screen. Probably pretty annoying. So in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to create your own custom AVDs. So first of all, go down here to this little button and click Create Virtual Device. Now, of course, the first thing we have to choose is what device do you want to create. Do you want to create a TV, a phone, a wearable, like a watch, or a tablet? Well, I'm just going to go to phone, and then once I click that, I get all of the definitions of phone. Now, don't let the word definition fool you. These are pretty much just different phones. Like if you went into, I don't know, like a Verizon store or like a Best Buy or something, this is pretty much the equivalent of picking out which phone that you want. So, of course, this edited one is one that I was working on earlier, but let's just go ahead and pick out, let's use the Galaxy Nexus. That was actually a pretty popular one. So this is the Galaxy Nexus phone. Now the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to clone this, because if I start just editing this, then it's going to mess up the default settings. So you always want to clone it, and this is going to allow you to use a copy that if you mess up with, then you just messed up the copy, no big deal. So first of all, since this is our own custom phone, I'm going to name this thing anything that I want. So we'll say that I don't know, we'll say that we're making the slimmest phone in the world, so I'm going to call my phone Slim Shady, the new phone that's going to wipe out Samsung, wipe out Motorola. Slim Shady is the next big thing. Alright, so anyways, there's my little daydream. Another thing that I want to point out is all of this stuff, again, we're going to be customizing a bunch of stuff on this phone later on, but this is pretty much the hardware configuration. Now, you don't really ever want to change the hardware configuration of your phone, because it's not like they ever release phones with like 720 by 18 million pixels. You know, the hardware always stays the same for the most part. It's the software that changes. So again, give your device or your phone a custom name and click Finish. And now if you go to phone, you can see, okay, this is our custom phone, same hardware, we didn't do anything stupid to it. So click on it and choose Next. So now that we have pretty much the phone itself, and by that I mean just the hardware, we can go ahead and start working on the system image. So this is pretty much saying what version of Android do you want to use. Now I recommend putting the latest one on it, just because, I don't know, you know that, oops, knocked over my mouse. Actually, by the way, this has nothing to do with app development or anything, but I started to get like carpal tunnel symptoms. So whenever I would type like my entire arm, there would be like a nerve that shot up, and I'd be like, oh my god, in the middle of my tutorial. So I got this cool little glove that had like beanbags in it, and I also got these things called a vertical mouse. So go to Google and type in vertical mouse. That's what I'm using. It's like this goofy looking mouse that I don't know, it kind of looks dangerous to be honest. But anyways, got a little sidetracked there. Back to the video. So what we want to choose is what version of Android do we want to put on that phone we just made. Well, a system image is pretty much just a copy of all the system files and settings. Pretty much just think of it as like your main system, your main computer. So the one I like to use is just x86 from Google. These all are open source, but I always just went with Google because, I don't know, they have like the best developers in the world, and you always know that their system image is nice, working correctly. It never gave me any problems, so I like to choose that one. Click Next. Now here is where I like to do a couple of things to pretty much customize my virtual device. So again, this name looks pretty good. Alright, that looks good, that looks good. One thing that I like to do is I like to go to scale, and right now, the one you just saw, Bucky's phone, that was 4dp on device, 1 pixel on screen. Now what this does is it just shrinks it to make it fit better on your screen, because again, this screen size of the phone, it might be bigger than your desktop screen size. So again, whenever you're developing, it's going to give you some problems. I usually choose 4dp on device. 10dp is like a really mini phone. It looks like, I don't know, like the size of your, it's just way too small. So again, I'm going to choose that was embarrassing. Anyways, moving on. So, yeah, that's what I like to do. Now, another thing I want to point out is this emulated performance, you can only choose one of these. And I'm going to recommend use host GPU. Now, what this does is it allows the emulator to use your computer's graphics card, the actual computer, your desktop or laptop or whatever, to make it run faster. Now, this snapshot, what this would do is it will pretty much keep the state of your emulator, so whenever you close out of it, it starts up faster again. So the reason I don't like this is because whenever you close your emulator, it has to save everything and it takes a little bit of time to close out. So I'm going to recommend use host GPU, which pretty much speeds up your emulator, and during your development process you can just keep your phone running. So as long as you keep it running, you shouldn't have any issues at all. So now that we have our virtual device set up, just click finish, and this takes a while to actually create it. But once we have it created, again, what we can do is we can actually edit it to go to this button. And of course, if you ever want to change any settings, maybe, okay, that was actually a little too small, so I'm going to boost that size up. You can do it right there. And of course, to test it out, you can just click this green button right here. Now, while this is booting up, again, like I said, during your development process, you can actually just leave this entire emulator running. You don't need to close out of it like I don't know, maybe in some other like programming languages you're learning, you actually close out of a program whenever you're testing it and then rebuild it. Well, the cool thing is you can just keep this window open and then click this to rebuild your project, and it's pretty much just going to restart the app right in your emulator, so you don't have to wait for this to boot up every time. So again, there you go. There's your emulator. Again, this one was just a demonstration. I'm going to delete it because I already have that sweet one, Bucky's phone, that I'm going to use for the tutorials. But if you ever want to make your own custom emulators, your AVDs, or edit them, delete them, now you know how. So now that we know how to make those, we can finally move on to the good stuff. It's going to be awesome. So I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Alright guys, welcome to another tutorial, and in this video, what I want to do is I want to explain pretty much the overall structure of a really basic, simple app. So make sure that you have, and these files should already be open because they probably open by default whenever you created your project, but if you accidentally close them, make sure you have this activity main.xml open, and that's of course an app, res, layout, activity main, and this one right here, main activity.java, and that's of course an app, Java, your com.thenewboston my app or whatever you named it package, and this file right here. So again, these two files open, and remember in the last couple tutorials I said every single app is made up of these things called activities. Now for now, just think of an activity as a screen. So if you're making an app for, I don't know, like your website, you might have an activity for your profile page, you might have an activity for the home screen, you might have an activity for like the about section for your company or something, I don't know. But each app, like I said, is made up of these screens, and these screens, the technical name for them is an activity. So, with that being said, we can now talk about this. Each activity within your app is made up of two parts. The first part is the part we see right here. It's the user interface. It's where all your colors, your text, pretty much the design of your activity is going to be right here in this XML file. Now the brains of your activity is this Java file right here. For example, whenever you have a button on your activity and you click it, well, you need to tell that button to do something. So the smart intelligence of your activity is going to be all in this code, the Java file. So again, your app is made up of activities, different screens. Now each screen has pretty much a user interface, the design, and the smarts of it, or the brains of it, and that's a Java class. So pretty much, if we ever wanted to make another activity, what we would do is we would create a new class with a new name and a new XML file. Simple enough. So now that we understand pretty much the basic overview of what an activity is and what they're made up of, we can start talking about the different components of it. So hop over to this XML file, which I said is pretty much the interface, the layout of your entire app, what it looks like. Now, if you look at the bottom, we have two different tabs right here, the design view and the text view. Now, I want to mention this because this might confuse some people. This is actually just two different views of the same exact file. What Android Studio did is they built this tool that is pretty much just a user-friendly tool of working with the interface, but what it's actually doing whenever you, I don't know, like edit part of your interface, is it's actually editing an underlying file for you, and that's the XML file. So you can either do that with the design tool by dragging and dropping stuff and editing some settings, or just editing the source code directly. So let's actually go ahead and look at an example of this. The first thing I want to do is get rid of this. So hop over to your XML file in design view, click on this hello world, and then just hit delete on your keyboard. So we have a blank nothing here. So the first thing I probably should mention is this. What you can do to each of your activities is you can add widgets to them. Now, widgets are just little thingies that you add to your interface. And I say thingies because there's not really one word to describe all these things. For example, let's add one of these large text areas. And this is pretty much to add any static, not changing text. So let's just go ahead and drag that in the middle and type anything you want. So if you actually drag it in the middle, you're going to see these little green grid lines, and that's just to align everything properly. Now if you double click this, then you can edit the text of it, and I'm just going to type in like the new Boston, hit enter, and it changes. So it's really intuitive like that, not really hard to figure out. So you can also add some more widgets if you want. Again, like I said, I'm just demonstrating how to use the basic tools, so feel free to drag any of these widgets on if you just want to play around with it. For example, you have radio buttons and progress bars, all that stuff. So again, widgets are just thingies that you can add to your interface. Now again, you can either do that in design mode or text mode. So whenever you click text mode, it actually shows you a little preview right here, which is actually nice. So let's go ahead and just add one little property. So in your XML file right here, just so I don't leave you guys hanging and I do explain everything. If you guys never worked with XML before, it's pretty much like HTML, but you can use cool names for your tags. So if you don't know HTML or XML, then I'll probably recommend going to watch those tutorials. But as long as you know HTML, then you guys will probably be able to follow along with these tutorials fine. So again, a real quick overview. We're going to be talking about this in detail later on. This tutorial is just to give you guys a basic understanding. So right now, our main tag right here is a relative layout. Now a layout is just a general overview of it's saying how widgets should be positioned on the screen, and there are different types of layouts that we can have, but it's pretty much the overall rules of how things can be laid out. Now this text view right here is just this widget right here. So each widget you add actually adds a new XML element to your file. So say that we wanted to change the background color of this right here. Well, what we would do is actually go up to relative layout and add a new attribute. For right now, I just want to show you guys, if you type Android colon and type background, then what you can do is you can actually type in a value here. Now this is actually one of my favorite colors, 006699. It's a blue color that I use on my website a lot. So again, you can also pretty much edit the interface this way through the source code. So again, the XML is your interface. We looked at how to change it with design, this design tool, and we're probably going to be using this one more often. And also the source code directly is pretty much just like a website, kind of like Dreamweaver if you ever use that. So yeah, and actually what I want to do is actually click this widget right here, and you see that I just clicked that and it gave me some prompts. What I'm going to do is hit Control Z, and I'm going to show you guys this little tip. Over here in their component tree is pretty much an overview of your entire activity. So this is your entire screen. This is the layout of how the widgets are supposed to be arranged, And right here, I'm going to click text view. So if you ever have a bunch of widgets and they're kind of hard to select, maybe they're close together or whatever, you can actually just select it right in this component tree and it's going to select it for you. So again, deselect it, select it again, make selecting your widgets a little bit easier. And actually, what I want to do to this is change the color of the text to white. So I'm going to select that widget, and I know the property for this is text color. So if I find that, I'm just going to click in, well, I guess I can just type it in and I know the value. The value of white is FFFFFF. And hit enter and check it out. Your text is now white. Probably the coolest app ever. Again, this tool right here, it isn't really that hard to understand, but we'll cover more about it later on. Got your widgets, component tree, properties, drag and drop, tomato, tomato. So now let's go ahead and hop over to this. Now there's actually one more file that I want to show you before I let you go. So each activity, like I said, is an XML and Java file. However, go up to your app and you're going to find a directory under it called manifest. Now expand this and you're going to find another XML file called Android manifest.xml. Now double click that to open it, and let me drag this all the way to the left. Alright, so to recap one more time, your app is more likely than not going to have a bunch of different activities. Now this Android manifest right here, think of this like is the main manager for your app. It's where everything comes together. If you have a bunch of activities floating around, they can be kind of hard to keep track of. So what this does, again, it's the main file that pretty much manages your entire app. So each activity that you create, this is actually going to be a new element in the Android manifest file. So I'll actually talk to you guys about this right now. As soon as your application starts, of course, your phone doesn't know what to do. It says, okay, where do I go? You have a bunch of different activities. Well, what am I supposed to be doing? The very first thing that your phone's going to do is it's going to look for a file called Android manifest.xml. So it says, okay, I'm always going to look for this file right here. And right after I open this file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of your activities. Now, right now, we only have one activity, so it shouldn't take it too long to find, but it's going to look through all your activities right here, and it's going to look for a property called, actually all these properties are kind of important, but it's going to look for a property called launcher. Now this launcher is pretty much saying that this is the main activity that you want to launch first. This is where your app's starting point is. So it says, okay, I found it, now let's check out this activity. Alright, so it says the launcher is the main activity. So from here, you want me to go to the main activity. So it hops over here, and then it says, okay, well, what's the deal with this main activity? Well, all of this we'll talk about later. Essentially, all this activity does right now is it sets this as your layout, activity underscore main, right there. So again, 3 very important files, but that's essentially all our app is doing right here. Again, I'm going to be covering the details of everything later on, but your phone is going to look at this first, Android manifest.xml. It's going to look for the activity that it's supposed to launch. Now ours says go to main activity, and all main activity does right now, can't talk, is it launches this layout. So what the user does is they click to open this app and they see this layout, but now we know what's going on behind the scenes, so we can edit it and start making some really awesome stuff. So for now, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and well, I'll see you guys later. Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial, and in this video, actually, the first thing I want you guys to do in this tutorial is go to your kitchen and grab a huge bucket of popcorn. And then after that, go to your bedroom and grab the most comfortable blanket you can possibly find, and then come back. Because once you have both those things, you're ready to hear the story, probably the greatest story I ever told. This story is called The Life of an Activity. So, you know, if you're an Android developer, this might be a pretty interesting story, definitely pretty useful. It starts out like this. Every activity that you ever create is going to be a subclass of the special class that we didn't see yet called the activity class. So out there somewhere, there's this activity class, and every activity that you create, we're going to inherit from. Now remember, whenever we inherit from something, we get all of the cool methods from that class. Now if you're looking at this and you're like, okay, I can clearly see that main activity extends action bar activity. And extends just means inherit, of course, you guys know. So this is actually a subclass of action bar activity, but you said that every activity that I create is going to inherit from this activity class. Well, even though you can't see it directly right here, this action bar activity is inheriting from another class, and that class is inheriting from activity. So this main activity that we just created is like fourth generation of the awesome activity class. But I just want to mention that because if you guys are looking at all these methods, you're like, okay, where did all these methods come from that I'm overriding? Well, they came from that activity class, and all this class is it's pretty much a basic template that gives us a bunch of cool functions that we could use on whatever activities we create. So that's the purpose of that. So since we have all these cool functions, let's talk about what they are and why we need them. Well, every activity that you create, it goes through a certain life cycle. Now, the first thing that happens is it calls this method called onCreate. So whenever the user first starts your app for the very first time and your activity is born, it gets created. Now, in this activity, what you typically do is you set the layout. Of course, that makes sense. The very first thing you want to do is give the user a nice interface set up to look at. Now, just a real quick overview, and I'm going to talk to you guys about this in detail in just a second, but eventually, whenever they close out of your app, it's going to call other methods like onDestroy. So whenever your app, whenever your activity is about to get destroyed or die, what you might want to do is do things like save their data for them. So if they, I don't know, are playing a game or something, you might want to save all of their settings so they can have it the next time they open your app. So basically what I'm trying to say is each activity that you create is going to go through many different stages in its life, or many different states as it's more commonly referred to. So in this tutorial, that's what I'm going to be doing, talking to you about every single state and the details of each. So the first thing that you actually probably want to do is start your emulator, because I know they kind of take a long time to boot up, and we're actually going to be tweaking some of this code and changing some things. So yeah, go ahead and do that. Now another thing I want to mention is this. I'm going to be talking to you guys through each stage of your activity's life, and instead of just me explaining it and talking through it, I figured it would be a better idea to actually print something out on the screen every time the state of your activity changed. So what we can do is we can actually import this cool class, and this is another tip. You guys are going to learn like 2 things in this tutorial. Bonus information. Alright, so if you go to android.util.log, what this is pretty much a package that lets us print out log information. And all we're going to do is we're going to print out something on the bottom of the screen that says like your activity is being created or something. So that's all we're doing. Alright, so once we have that imported, go above all your methods, and we're going to make a new, let me scroll down here. We're going to make a new private static